Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. This is S4A live stream number 32. And this is a surprise stream. Usually we just do one of these a week, usually. But this is I wasn't able to complete any of the audiobooks for this weekend and wanted to put some content up anyway, stream. And so that's what we're doing, basically. It's a fill-in because I am still working on the 18th Premiere and Anti-During Part 1 and just neither of them was going to be done in time. This is partly a case of I burned out last weekend doing that set of 8 audiobooks, and part of it was just other stuff happening this week, both channel related and not. So anyway, I think this is a decent consolation prize. We have some articles we can discuss actually that I had left over from Wednesday, so that works out anyway. Some interesting stuff. Plus, the CDC just relaxed their COVID guidance, and my head is spinning. Like, I'm honestly in shock from it. We're going to look at the details of that as well. Of course, we have, about 24 people in the chat currently, and we'll be talking with them as well. Hope everybody is doing well on this Saturday. So anyway, as usual, before we get into the chat or anything like that, let's do our COVID update, which I do have some long videos planned, and it's been getting harder and harder to do the longer COVID updates, talking about the science and the knowledge of how COVID affects the body and all that kind of stuff, because there really is a lot of research now. There's also the kind of political current events related to the COVID situation have been just getting crazier and crazier. So on the screen right now, excuse me, this is Biden's approval rating. As you can see, he's been underwater for a full year. He's been trending upwards slightly recently. Who knows if this is the Trump rate or I don't know. But what they've been doing is not popular. And one of the better explanations for the CDC just completely washing their hands of COVID entirely that I've seen is that basically the Democrats decided, although it isn't just the Democrats, this really is kind of happening across the entire imperialist aligned world right now. I mean, the US sort of block of it. And so I don't know, it's partly that, but really at this point we just have differing shades of, and this has always been true to some extent, but we really just have differing shades of COVID denialism and COVID minimization. But they're starting to really converge. I mean, the Democrats will at least say that the vaccine works, and it does. Actually, we're going to look at some of the vaccine efficacy stats. That was the screenshot I forgot to get. I was sitting here preparing for this stream, and I was like, I'm forgetting something. So actually, we may or may not look at that. I might just read them out because I don't think I chopped up the screenshot. But anyway, the efficacy is not as good as you would want it to be. And actually, across the board, between Delta and Omicron, there was a significant drop. Because what's happening is the virus is mutating to become more immune evasive. What does that mean exactly? Well, one of the things that it means is that it's getting physical mutations in the shape of the virus, particularly in the places where antibodies would grab onto the virus to haul it off to be eaten by a macrophage or whatever, to dispose of the virus. So, it's like trying to handcuff somebody who has no hands, and the handcuff just keeps sliding off the wrist. That's a little bit of what's going on. So that's why, BA.5, it's the most severe, it's more likely to cause hospitalizations, and it's also the most immune evasive variant to date. And that's been a trend that we've seen in the mutations over time, generally speaking. And so yeah, whether it's vaccine immunity or whether it's, quote, natural immunity, which, either of these immunities, it's partial and it's temporary because there's still a substantial chance of breakthrough infections anyway, and it's temporary. It wears off pretty quickly. I mean, even the vaccine wears out, in the beginning, we knew it wore off after about 6 or 8 months tops. And, the natural immunity, which comes at the cost of much greater inflammation throughout your body, organ damage, all that. Yeah, that will give you some immunity too, but it's partial and it's temporary, exactly like the vaccine. The vaccine is good. It does give you some protection, but it's not nearly enough to be going hands off as the CDC is doing. So anyway, somebody was theorizing that basically the Democrats decided they could either give people good COVID protections or they could just try to have, sort of the good economy, which this is really sort of a false choice because letting tons of people get COVID and long COVID is not going to be good for the economy, really either in the short term or in the medium or long term. So poor calculation at best, but they decided to basically cave to the right wing, to cave to the denialists and the minimizers. And, it was never quite black and white, but it was, let's say, gray and black. It's really converging into darker and darker shades of gray until we've really just got one strong chorus of denial and minimization. Point is, it's not really working for Biden. Actually, this started really dropping the approval rating around the same time that Delta emerged. They declared like the virus is over, we've won. Well, it doesn't really look like we're winning to me. So here's the BioBot. This is wastewater monitoring. And you can see that the curve has descended from the peak of the last few weeks, although it's still above the plateau level that we hit in May. So really for going on 3 months now, we've been plateauing at this super high level. This is the longest sustained surge. And if we were actually counting cases accurately, in other words, that the cases are not getting counted because people are doing rapid tests at home, you could probably double the case count. And what would that do to that light blue line underneath the curve, which is the cases? It would probably double it. And that would put it on par with any surge that we've seen to date. Now, there are other factors you can look at, like hospitalizations, for example. Let me see. I didn't label these as well as I would like, so let me just take a look. This is deaths. So we'll look at, I guess, hospitalizations in a minute. Here's deaths. This is from the CDC. And what we've got here is that the deaths are fairly low in terms of the overall, since the pandemic started, but they're higher than last summer. So we're actually doing worse right now than we were last summer, at least for, where this time last summer there was a dip in the death rate. Well, we've been plateauing at that level for a long time. So as far as, if this is, quote, living with COVID, then it doesn't get any better than this. And in fact, it probably will get substantially worse. Because again, this is the summer. This is the time that people are healthiest. The fewest people naturally die in the summer, and people tend to die a lot more in December, January, February. Your body's just contending with a lot more. Your vitamin D is lower, like fresh air, sunshine, cold stress, all that kind of stuff. Seasonally, that does have an effect. But this is about as good as it gets. It's not like it's at record low levels. It's, you could say the second lowest level that it's been, but it's holding steady. Doesn't really look like that is going to be going away. And probably in the fall and winter, that's going to go up. Remember that deaths are a lagging indicator. They're the last thing to show up. You see COVID in the wastewater, then cases, then hospitalizations, then deaths. You don't just like catch COVID and then die. It takes a few weeks, usually. So anyway, let me see if I have the hospitalizations here. And I didn't grab that. Anyway, the trend that we see from hospitalizations is that's also not great. It is for people, particularly in the over 60 or over 70 brackets, hospitalizations are very high. And the thing about hospitalizations is even if you don't die right away, your odds of getting long COVID are basically 50 or 60%, and your odds of just flat out dying in the next 12 months also go way up. So it's not like you come out of a COVID hospitalization just feeling great. If your COVID was bad enough to land you in the hospital, you're coming out of there with really significant organ damage. Um, so, this trend of trying to minimize this, it's insane. It makes no sense. I don't know what else to say. So let's look at how we're doing on first the puppies and rain. I always keep almost saying puppies and rain dogs, and really shouldn't say that because that's not a word. Puppies and rainbows map. It's easier to type than to say, I guess. This is the community levels map that they invented basically this winter to try to make the COVID situation look better in the United States. And we'll look at how this is calculated in just a minute. But even on this map, it's not a rosy picture. You can see in the upper right, the community levels are high in 40% of US counties, and they're medium in 41%. So basically combined here, we got about 80%, excuse me, of US counties are medium or high. Under 20% are low, 19.8%. So that's where we're at, even with their heavily revised, downplay it as much as possible map. Things are looking, alarming, at least moderately alarming, in 80%, 4 out of 5 US counties. So how is that calculated? Well, we have that here. So they factor in a couple things. It's not just raw cases, although that is in there. So basically, you can see low, medium, and high. New cases, it can be either under 200 cases or greater than or equal to 200 cases. And this is, oh, sorry, I'm thinking of the other one. This is admissions. So a lot of this is about hospitals. That's obviously the second one there. Percent of staffed inpatient beds in use by COVID-19 patients. We're going to look at overall cases on the transmission map. That's the next thing we're looking at. Sorry. Anyway, so this is basically like saying, hey, we're repealing drunk driving laws because we have spare beds in the ER. That's bad policy for obvious reasons. But that's pretty much what they're looking at is like, are the hospitals getting overloaded? That's kind of a major part of this. But anyway, yeah, the cases are there, and you can see that's number of new cases in the county in the past 7 days, divided by the population in the county or other administrative level, multiplied by 100,000. So that does factor in there, but they're also looking at, is it overloading the hospitals? And even in 40% of US counties, we're at the highest alert level there. And then in another 40% of US counties, we're at the medium alert level. Now, would you say that this is the time to relax guidance? I would not. We're going to look at how they relax the guidance in just a minute. First, let's look at the transmission levels. This is the non-puppies and rainbows map. This is the one that they had initially. Now, if it looks almost solid red to you, you're not alone. That also looks almost solid red to me. In fact, if we look at the upper right corner, what do we see? We see that it is at high community transmission in 93.95% of US counties. And then it's at substantial in another 4%. So literally 90, this is insanity. 98% of the country is at high or substantial. And I mean, 94% is at high. And you look at the places that are at the lower levels, and it's like, okay, we got some in Nevada. That's probably just desert, or Nevada, excuse me. There's some in Montana that, again, not a densely populated state. In Nebraska, the Dakotas, some in like kind of western central Texas, again, sparsely populated. And then up in New England in the Northeast as well. Again, sparsely populated. So, pretty much if you're in a place where people live at all, it's high transmission. Now, look at this map. Really soak it in. Does this look like a good time to relax guidance? Obviously, not from any kind of evidence based medical or public health perspective. Obviously not. So, why did they do it? Clearly political. Again, we'll get to that. But let's just look at, what does this map actually mean? Well, it's about cases. So new cases per 100,000 people in the past 7 days, and also factoring in the percentage of positive nucleic acid amplification tests in the past 7 days. So this is based on, this isn't a test positivity rate. In other words, test positivity, that's affected by how many tests you're doing, in the sense that if you're not testing enough, the positivity rate will look artificially high, because if you only test people who are likely to have COVID, then you're going to probably wind up with a higher test positivity rate. This is just the number of cases per 100,000 people in the population in the past week. So if you're under testing, that's actually going to lower this. So even with the poor amount of testing that we have currently, the country's still at 95, 94% high, and then another 4% substantial. So I suspect like the entire country roughly would be at high if we were doing adequate testing, because it would be catching even more cases that would factor into this. And again, on this, the negative results don't affect it adversely. So anyway, even with the undercounting of tests, we're still at high transmission across 94% of US counties. Does it look like the time to relax guidance? Not to me. So, how are they relaxing the guidance? Well, this is from NPR, summary infographic, August 11. New COVID-19 guidance from CDC focuses on individual decisions. Now, has that been working so far? No, it fucking isn't. So, 4 bullet points. Those exposed to the virus are no longer required to quarantine. So, hey, are you sick? Go out and mingle. That's bullet point 1. 2, unvaccinated people now have the same guidance as vaccinated people, because who cares, I guess. 3, students can stay in class after being exposed to the virus. In other words, every school is now a super spreader institution. So I saw this. There was a program that I was going to do back in the winter. I postponed it because of Omicron, because there were a million cases a day at the time when I had to decide, was I going to go in and do this? And I decided not to. And I was thinking of going back in the fall. And what the school has as their policy, because I was like, well, maybe the school is better than the CDC. So, no, it was also a joke. Tell me if you spot the logical problem here. The policy at the school was, if you have a positive COVID test, you are supposed to not go to class. Are they enforcing that in any way? No. You do not have to do anything to, to go to class. So it's entirely the honor system. That's not even really the problem. I mean, that's a problem, but here's the part where it gets completely thrown out the window. After having a positive test, do you have to have a negative test to come back to class? No. Okay, so I guess we don't care at all, huh? Yeah, so that's students can stay in class after being exposed to the virus. So I can't even imagine what this is going to do this fall, but yeah. And 4, it's no longer recommended to screen those without symptoms. So you have asymptomatic or mild COVID, no screening. So they're not going to be doing testing. I think that the only places that the CDC is maintaining any kind of guidance is nursing homes and prisons, which have been very bad sources of outbreaks, especially early on. Just take a sip of water here. Okay. But how well are those actually going to be implemented, particularly in prisons where there's so much contempt among, in a country of fascists, the United States, some of the worst ones work in the prisons as guards. So, how thoroughly do you think that's going to be actually followed at this point when everyone is walking around 24/7, COVID is over, COVID is over, COVID is over? Well, I tend to think that it's not going to be followed particularly well there. So when I say that my head is spinning, because keep in mind, COVID is not over, like not remotely. This story was just from recently, August 4th in Fortune. Blood clots, heart problems, kidney failure. COVID creates a higher risk for rare pediatric health problems. What's that? CDC study. So the CDC has this mountain of evidence sitting on their lap, and they decide to reduce the guidance. Basically, like, their policy is COVID is over. I don't have a screenshot of it, but how a lot of the reporting was going is like the CDC is couching this in terms of their guidance is following what people are already doing. The main problem with that is that what people are already doing is spreading the virus. So if you want to have evidence-based public health or medical policy, you don't just tail the public's disease transmission behavior. That's the literal exact opposite of what you should do. So you don't just set your guidance to what people are already doing. That's not guidance. That's not leadership. That's following the public, not guiding the public, not leading the public. It's tailing the public. So they have thrown it away. They have thrown it away. I think we're going to be in for a gigantic shit show this fall and winter. So anyway, I think that's basically the broad strokes of what I was trying to cover. While we're still on health stuff, also monkeypox, we're up over 10,000 cases in the United States now. And just a side note on the two things. So there is a study that came out. Actually, there's a preprint on medRxiv. Air and surface sampling for monkeypox virus in UK hospitals. They found that it is airborne. So just to, the CDC has consistently been trying to downplay the airborne nature of monkeypox. They're trying to make it out as like exclusively a men having sex with men sexually transmitted infection. That's not what it is at all. So findings of this study. We identified widespread surface contamination. 66 out of 73 samples were positive in occupied patient rooms on healthcare worker personal protective equipment after use. So that's a lot. That's like, 90% roughly contamination of the workers' PPE. Widespread surface contamination in occupied patient rooms and in doffing areas. 5 out of 15 air samples taken were positive. 5 out of 15 air samples taken were positive. Significantly, 3 out of 4 air samples collected during a bed linen change in one patient's room were positive. So you change the bed linens, obviously the air gets sort of disturbed as you straighten out the sheets and move the fabrics around and things like that. 3 out of 4 air samples were positive for monkeypox virus. So it's very airborne. Replication competent virus was identified in 2 of 4 samples selected for isolation, including from air samples collected during the bed linen change. So, okay, just because you detected monkeypox virus doesn't mean that it's infectious, that it's capable of causing disease were it to get in somebody's nose or mouth or whatever. But 2 out of 4 were. So that's still a significant amount of infection-capable virus that was found in the air. All right. Interpretation. These data demonstrate significant contamination in isolation facilities and potential for aerosolization, turning it into an aerosol, widely dispersed particle throughout the air, of the monkeypox virus during specific activities. PPE contamination was observed after clinical contact and changing of bed linen. Additionally, contamination of hard surfaces in doffing areas supports the importance of cleaning protocols, PPE use, and doffing procedures. So the hard surfaces were contaminated. So monkeypox, can land on a table or chair or whatever and linger there. So this is horrifying, specifically because they're not doing a goddamn thing about it, and they're downplaying it like it's their job, like, which I guess it literally is. But sorry, it's not supposed to be their job, but it has been made their job to downplay it. So that's where we're at with COVID and monkeypox. I think we have a five-alarm disaster on the way. Personally, there's absolutely no reason to think any of this is, in hand in any way at all. We're also, just for deaths, during Omicron, we were having a 9/11 a week, or sorry, a 9/11 a day as far as the number of people dying a day during Omicron. We're down to a 9/11 a week, and that's supposed to be the living with COVID situation. How long do you think that this can hold up for? It's not just the deaths. Again, it's the long COVID. That's what my last two COVID update specific videos were about, which I guess coming around to that, I do plan to do more of those next week. Like I said, it just is piling up at such a rate, it's hard for me to keep up with it. But I do have, more specifics of the health impacts of COVID to review. Remember from the last video that even if you're fully vaccinated, you still have a 1 in 6 chance of getting long COVID. That's different for different age groups and demographics. But really, it's like if you're over 30, the odds are substantial of getting long COVID. And then as far as what's it doing to lifespan, we know that people are more likely to die in the next year after getting COVID. So this just isn't going to last. Also, again, COVID is showing no sign of like going away on its own. So it's entirely possible that we're only halfway through the pandemic or less. So I don't know how we're going to come back from this, but it's going to take some kind of mass protest. We're going to have to fight the CDC, which, I saw somebody mentioning is better called the CD because it's no longer the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. It's just the Centers for Disease. That's what they're doing. It's just, yeah. Anyway, let's check in with the chat. On the way to do that, let's thank the patrons. A couple of people signed up in the past 2 days. I haven't had a chance to update this graphic, but thanks to the current patrons, plus 3 or 4 others, for their financial support, which is vital as far as me being able to spend as much time as I am on the channel. Makes it a lot easier. Patreon.com/socialism for all. And of course, if you are a patron or if you're not a patron, engagement helps too. So like, share, subscribe, and comment, even if it's just, random letters or whatever. All that helps YouTube to recommend the content to more people. Channel has been growing. Actually, we're having a record month right now. I think in the last 28 days, 680 people have become subscribers. So welcome to all the new people. I hope to chat with more of you in the comments or on Twitter or whatever. It's really great to see more people taking an interest in learning about socialism. All right, so let's go and chat with the chat before we move on to any other articles or things like that. All right. Big government doing stuff for big business. Yeah, well, that is who owns the government. It is the capitalist state. It is run by and for capitalists. They're not all individually big capitalists who work in the government, but they are their servants for sure. Another comment, happy I'm double vaxxed, although the annoying conspiracy guy at work claims I now have AIDS from the vaccine. I don't know about that. I feel fine. Well, you definitely don't have AIDS from the vaccine. That guy is just ignorant. But, in fact, that raises the point. I had wanted to do, as part of the recent slate of COVID updates, I had wanted to do one specifically on COVID and T cells, which of course is, roughly half of your primary immune system. T cells and B cells. These are cells generated in your bone marrow and then become a major part of your immune system, responding to things like viruses. Um, so you may know that one of the main ports for COVID to infect your body cells is the ACE2 receptor. And ACE2 receptors are found in many major organs, your gut, um, lungs, heart, liver, kidneys, brain, especially your brain stem. And COVID, that's basically the door that COVID walks through to infect your cells. There's also significant evidence that COVID can directly infect T cells. And there's been a lot of evidence that people who have been infected with COVID have lowered T cell counts, like dramatically lowered T cell counts. So it seems like it only lasts for a year after infection. But if the strategy is everybody just keeps getting COVID repeatedly, like every 4 months, you just get reinfected with COVID, this is going to wipe out about half your immune system. And so you're going to be walking around not only more prone to other diseases, possibly, but your T cells also do things like destroy emerging cancer within your body. So walking around with, your naive T cells wiped out and overall T cell count being much lower, that is really bad. It's not exactly the same way that HIV causes AIDS. It's not exactly the same mechanism, but some of the effects are similar. We still don't know because, like I said, T cells, they help with infections and they can also help, to attack cancer cells that their cell division process has gone amok and is, generating pathological kinds of growth in your body. It can take care of that. How long does it take for those growths to become problematic? Well, it's not overnight. This is, we're talking about lagging indicators. That may not show up for 6 months or a year or 2 years, or you might not have enough T cells to completely get rid of it. It might slow the growth, but then on year 3, it might break through and become a problem. So they're playing a really dangerous game, because the initial symptoms sometimes look like a cold or flu. That's not a reason to conclude that that's where it stops. Polio also starts with similar symptoms. HIV also starts with similar, cold-like symptoms, flu-like symptoms. But as we know, well, long polio or long HIV, these are really serious things. Long COVID needs to be taken seriously. Even the CDC estimates that 8% of people, I think that it's at least twice that high, have long COVID. And they're okay with that. We're going to have to fight the CDC. So we had the first round of people fighting it from the right, saying, oh, none of this is a problem at all. The back to work people, we're going to have to fight them from the left now. And it's obviously going to be a much harder fight because those right wingers are within the paradigm of capitalism. We're not. And yeah. So next comment. Imagine you work in the healthcare industry and you go week to week watching different wings go in and out of lockdown, and yet they still allow them visitors who don't wear masks properly and they leave the damn doors open on a quarantine resident. Yeah, there's all kinds of shit. Healthcare workers quit in droves in 2020 and 2021, and I think up till today. And the things that many healthcare workers have seen have been traumatizing to the point of like people never want to work in this field again. It's scary. And, I don't know what the long-term plan is here because we've seen it in the UK as well. People out by the tens of thousands due to COVID or long COVID. You just literally cannot run an advanced economy on this basis. So we know it's about short-term profits and it's all about the quarterly reports and all that stuff. But, this really may be the end of this system. How long before another 2008 type event? People are already unhappy with the system. And then it just, at that point, it's on those of us who you know, are a bit more studied and class conscious and historically aware. We've got to be there to provide the leadership and the education for people to get organized in effective ways. But anyway, you're absolutely right. What's going on within healthcare? Not to mention, just look around social media. The amount of um, MDs, MPHs, other people who have relevant, medical and public health credentials, who are rubber stamping the mass death, mass disability policy that's going on right now. All these people, um, when we eventually get justice for the situation, need to be dealt with. They need, at a bare minimum, to have their credentials revoked because they've been directly contributing to a mass death, mass disability policy here. Um, yeah. So you got vaxxed and just moved on with your life. Well, hope that works for you because unfortunately, I didn't clean up the screenshots, like I said. The vaccine efficacy is not outstanding, and it's been going down between Delta and then, it got roughly cut in half on the Omicron. So this is, I think, a really short-sighted and ignorant view. You're correct that many people are pretending, of course, at the goading of, the capitalist class generally has been telling people to move on. Biden started saying last May, so over a year now, mask or vax. That was completely contraindicated by the medical evidence. So congrats, you're listening to Joe Biden. You're a fucking tool. What can I tell you? No, they didn't decide that natural immunity is stronger. So, like I said before, natural immunity is partial and temporary, like the virus, or sorry, like the vaccine, and it comes at the cost, unlike the vaccine, of massive potentially systemic inflammation in your body. So there's cases of, healthy people in their 40s winding up with pacemakers because of the damage that it did to their heart. Was just talking with a woman on social media last night whose 10-year-old daughter died of heart failure after getting COVID. So, no, quote, natural immunity comes at a huge cost of systemic damage. Now, even with the vaccine, there is a much lower risk of, for example, heart inflammation, but it's substantially more from the virus. Now, if you get the virus, I said it's not that the natural immunity is not stronger. You do get a broader range of antibodies. The problem is that the variants are evolving to evade the antibodies. We're at the point where BA 2.75, which thankfully so far has not had a major outbreak in the United States, but it could, it has in India. It completely evades all of the currently approved monoclonal antibody treatments. That's one of the main things that they give people in the hospital. Monoclonal antibodies are basically synthetically generated antibodies that they, feed into your bloodstream. They don't work on BA 2.75. So, this whole thing of like, oh, we're immune to COVID, it's partial and temporary. I want those two words in everybody's mind. Partial and temporary. And if you're talking about getting immune from an infection, it's partial, temporary, and at the cost of systemic inflammation and organ damage, and the risk of long COVID as well, which, of course, the risk of long COVID from the vaccine, as far as we know, is zero. So, yeah. Kids are safe from the COVID. Yeah, so I think somebody needs to go out of the chat. We just put up evidence to the contrary on there. In fact, it raises the risk of a number of very serious diseases. I just mentioned, yeah, just, I don't know why people are so, you're repeating misinformation here when you say things like that. And we get enough of that from Joe Biden. I don't know why you're coming into the chat to share this ignorance. Another comment, my college also reversed the mask mandate as well as testing and screening. Exact words, as the pandemic evolves and the severity of illness seems to be waning, Yeah, I mean, anything can seem to be. If you get blind drunk, a lot of things seem different, but it doesn't mean that they actually are. We're adjusting our campus protocols to better align with current public health conditions, in line with the transitions that have already occurred at other academic institutions within the county and state. This is UCLA. So, yeah, everybody is just sort of blaming somebody else. All the institutions and businesses are saying, well, the CDC says this, and the CDC is just like, well, we're just following what people are already doing, which is that's not evidence based. That's that's just called capitulation. That's called giving up. So it's this Ouroboros of, oh, well, I'm following them. Well, I'm following them. So it's this big circle of everybody's blaming everybody to just do what they want in the end, which is nothing. And where is this going to get people? Well, already 1 million have died and counting. And how many millions have long COVID? 10 million? At least 20 million? Where is this going to get us? But again, that kind of long-term thinking, even medium-term thinking, because it really doesn't take that long, who wants to do it? I mean, this is literally the job of people in public health, but okay. How can we as communists not get labeled by bad faith pseudo-leftists saying we are protecting the powerful? There's, I mean, that's the exact opposite. Going by the policy of capital is doing what, I mean, that's what they're doing. So the policy of capital is pretend COVID is done. That's capital's policy. So it's completely incorrect in this case. COVID is not by a long shot done. So, I mean, I would start there. As far as the like, oh, you're for big pharma. Actually, the vaccines are one component of what we need as a response to this, but we need shutdowns. That's not a big pharma position at all. We need at least mask mandates, at least. The only businesses those really affect are, restaurants and dentists, like in a significant way. So, yeah, but it's the restaurants. The country will fall apart, and then they'll have this petty bourgeois fascist revolt if they keep a mask mandate going and they interfere with the restaurant business. So, I mean, that's what's going on. I guess, it does boil down to, do you care that there's a serious virus that keeps mutating every few months to get worse? That has been spreading for the last 2.5 years, and it's gotten worse this entire fucking time. And it's killed 1 million people in the United States. Do you care about that? I mean, if you don't, then let us know you just don't give a shit. Like, if you don't, I think that it's hard to say that you care about working people at that point, let alone people who are especially vulnerable, such as disabled people, etc. I mean, you start having that conversation. You think the US left is insensitive on race, and it is. I mean, let's talk about disability. People turn into like Nazis when we start talking about that. Yeah, CDC has gone YOLO mode. Yeah, and really, speaking of you only live once, lifespan, and how long do you live for? Well, shorter with COVID. How do we fight the meme that COVID protections are authoritarian and only benefit the rich? I mean, authoritarianism, it's just a buzzword the right throws out. Like, people who say that don't usually engage in critical thinking in the first place. So, I don't know. I mean, just get creative. But people who think on that level, they don't examine the ways in which actually like work or starve is already authoritarian. So, anyway, I don't know. I think that there's a substantial amount of people who can't be reached by sheer persuasion. We can't just debate fascists away. What we need to do is organize the people who are already on this page and, rally for action and put together info kits and, put together your top 4 or 5 talking points and do a press conference. Like, that's the kind of thing you need to do. what I've been wondering is where within medicine and public health is there going to be any kind of counter to this? And people are just staying like unorganized individuals to a pretty extreme degree. And I gotta say, even a lot of the left parties have completely dropped the ball on this as well. Um, so yeah, I think we're in for several really bad years, and it's to be honest, everybody's fault. Mostly, in order of who has power. Obviously, the people with the most power, it's their fault the most. But even the would-be opposition is not really coming anywhere near what needs to be done. I just don't think anyone's taking it seriously. And I think there's a great degree of selfishness in this. And I think that there's a great degree of just a lot of complicity across the board from many, many parties. The healthcare administrators at our workplace have yet to say anything about monkeypox whatsoever. Yeah, they're probably still on the cross your fingers and like wish it away um, phase. Why would you be prepared at all? Does preparation, including informational preparation, does that have anything to do with disease prevention? Of course it does. But we're in the fascist magical thinking, wishful thinking stage of the decay and collapse of the United States. Another 2008 or two is going to do this country in, and I really mean that. You look at how much things have shifted even after the first 2008. The emergence of the Tea Party as a really organized force, the doubling down of the neoliberal, quote, center. I mean, obviously, it's this like the right wing, but the responsible adults in the room, quote unquote, they keep doubling down and getting more and more unaccountable. Meanwhile, the more sort of extreme right rises up as well. That's all happened since, the last 13 years or so. Since, going on 14, I guess. Since the first 2008. And another one, we're going to be in dire straits. I mean, dire. So yeah, that's just where we're at. Crazy question. Could a state like California secede from the US to create a socialist state if the population advocated for it, voted majority in favor? Well, I think that the thing to keep in mind about secession, unfortunately, it's great that people are showing up for this channel, and that I think that there is a rising left movement in general. The problem is the right is just honestly so much bigger at this point in relation to us. That may not be the case forever. It may not be the case in 5 years. But right now, there is a secession movement in California, and it's dominated by the right wing. So actually, we have an article about that I will be reading. This is actually probably a good segue. I mean, is it possible that you could secede? I mean, the question of secession in the United States was already addressed in kind of a major way in the U.S. Civil War. That was about 150 years ago. So that's what happens with secession. I think that that's extraordinarily unlikely. And if it was at this point, it would be, kind of a right-dominated effort. But let's talk about that, actually, because I do have a whole article about California militias. I just have to take a break for 1 minute. I'll be right back. All right. So let me add on this as well, just before we pivot to that, while we're still talking about COVID more. There are certain things that could change this. Like, for example, if there was a really effective vaccine. So, there are effects to be had from the current vaccines. It's somewhat effective. It's not nearly effective enough to just contain the pandemic, like not by a lot. So, there could be a substantially better vaccine that comes out, but so far this is hypothetical. As things stand currently, there's no reason to relax this guidance and no reason not to think that this fall and winter are going to be awful, just like the previous two have been. And even more so because there's worse variants now. Plus, people's vaccines have worn off. People over 50 are getting the booster shot, but even with the booster shot, the efficacy is, far from 100%. So, and then schools are now going to be super spreaders. But so anyway, here we have an article. In a California town, a militia is welcomed by some, cautioned by others. Echo Company is one of hundreds of active militias across the U.S., according to a 2016 tally by the Southern Poverty Law Center, numbers that have climbed steadily in recent years. This is by Ben Collins and Chiara Sotil. The parking lot of H&L Lumber in Mariposa, California, was host to a flurry of activity Sunday as members of a local militia sporting military-style fatigues handed out pancakes and steak sandwiches to evacuees of the Oak Fire raging nearby. Along with breakfast, they doled out business cards with QR codes and directions to join their militia. Some say the members of the Echo Company militia served as a de facto checkpoint or an advertisement for the group during the crisis, according to witnesses who spoke to NBC News on condition of anonymity because they did not want to be identified. Quote, they had their whole setup with military-style trucks, and they were in their fatigues and whatnot, said Rain Winchester, a manager at Mariposa's nearby Monarch Ranch. Quote, I'm fine with them helping out with relief efforts as long as they don't start to set up roadblocks or do any security work. I don't want them doing the work of the sheriff's office. So this ties in a bit with the quote defund the FBI that the Republican Party has been saying, specifically the far right Trump-aligned MAGA wing of the GOP. They're not as, and I have to say, there are times where major issues come up within the U.S. left that are like super divisive. It's like a 60-40 split or a 50-50 split. I have to say, this whole, do we believe the Republicans when they say defund the FBI? Looked to me like 95-97% of people got this one right. It was really only the extreme opportunists like Jimmy Dore, people in that orbit, Brianna Joy Gray, who even gave this like the time of day at face value. So congrats to everybody for getting that one right, that no, the right wing doesn't want to, get rid of the FBI. No, the Blue Lives Matter people are not going to be like calling for defunding law enforcement. That is not anti-law enforcement sentiment. All they want is they want a more right-wing loyal, they want a more fascist loyal set of law enforcement institutions. They want to drag it right. There's already been in Border Patrol and other places like a far right shift as it is. Like, where do you think people who are most extreme on the anti-immigrant and all that stuff, where do you think they go? They go work for those agencies. So there's already that kind of shift, and MAGA would like nothing more than to obliterate any sense of non-specifically MAGA loyal people in the FBI or whatever and replace it with people of their own. So anyway, it was good that, again, the overwhelming majority of people, got that one right. Sometimes these issues come up and it seems to me like the movement as a whole gets a, C, D, or an F. Happy to say, I think it was at least an A- on that one. But this is the thing also is like, well, okay, so there's a militia that potentially is vying for, the cops job. Do we like the cops? Obviously not. Like they're there to protect Capitol. They're there for the right wing, generally speaking, for the status quo, which is very right wing. But the question is, could it be worse? And yeah, it could be worse. They could be even more, disregarding of civil rights of any kind. As socialists, we want to use the whatever liberties bourgeois democracy affords to us, while understanding that bourgeois democracy is a phantom and an illusion and a pale shadow of what we would have under proletarian democracy. But that said, Lenin wrote on this many, many times. You want to use everything that bourgeois democracy gives you, and this would definitely be a shift to a more terroristic system. Anyway, the militia is becoming a consistent presence in rural Mariposa County, southeast of Sacramento. We've done stories on this area before. With a population of 17,131 scattered across 14 towns, according to the 2010 U.S. Census. Providing immediate assistance in military-style garb during an emergency is a recruiting tactic used by militias nationwide, not confined to Mariposa County. As climate change creates more wildfires and adverse weather events, further straining local law enforcement and fire services, militias around the nation have seized on the disasters as opportunities to entangle themselves into the politics and emergency services of small communities. So, time out. Already, cops are right-wing, tend to be Republican, and, more of the right-wing extreme end of things. Again, you have kind of fascist beliefs, where's a great place to go work to exercise those. Well, what we see here, they're talking about as the existing government is strained, underfunded, whatever, not able to respond to, in this case, climate change induced, fires resulting from droughts. There's a lot of drought going on across the United States and the world right now. What happens? Well, the irregulars come in, the wannabe cops come in, the vigilantes come in. And what tends to be their political affiliation? They're more of the same, but usually even worse. So this is what's happening now. It's also what happens with the, street gangs, the right-wing vigilante gangs that show up as, quote, counter-protesters to harass anti-fascist and left activists when there's left demonstrations. This is more of that. But they're trying to do basic functions of, as the government breaks down. Now, we've seen left examples of this. For example, in deliberately underserved communities like the Black Panther Party would do. This is quite different from that. These are not the Black Panthers, let's put it that way. Continuing. In the aftermath of fires in Oregon, kind of fash central when you get out into the rural areas, in 2020, militias set up civilian roadblocks, which stopped at least one fleeing black family and were ignored by local police. So again, cops and Klan, hand in hand. Members of the Oath Keepers, a group represented at the January 6th thing, by the way, have created a community protection team, 6 of whom were arrested for breaking a curfew during Hurricane Michael in 2018. Joshua James, here we go, an Oath Keeper who stormed the U.S. Capitol on January 6, met and joined the militia during relief efforts for Hurricane Irma in 2017. Slide am I on? 3. Wildfires in the United States this year have consumed 5.6 million acres. The Oak Fire destroyed at least 116 homes and burned more than 19,000 acres, according to local fire authorities. Serving as de facto aid organizations is a common recruitment and community ingratiation tactic used in rural areas to win support and acceptance during emergencies. Rachel Goldwasser, a research analyst at the Southern Poverty Law Center, said. Although help is always needed in difficult times, it is incredibly important to remember that militias are providing it with an agenda, she said. That agenda is to recruit members of the community, including victims, into their organizations, legitimize them, and radicalize people into holding grievances against the government they may very well express through intimidation or violence. Echo Company is one of hundreds of active militias across the U.S., according to a 2016 tally by the Southern Poverty Law Center, numbers that have climbed steadily in recent years. Experts have warned that militia groups have been emboldened by former President Donald Trump and other leaders of the Republican Party. They have made direct calls to them. It was not immediately clear how many members Echo Company has. In times where there are no disasters, it's most commonly known for holding training sessions for its members and attending protests, common practices for U.S. militias. Echo Company is, however, well known among California militias. It was ousted from the larger California state militia organization in 2020 for capitalizing on larger, fictitious fears of Antifa looters, and for behavior that was interpreted as potentially insightful and militant. Echo Company attended a, quote, straight pride rally in 2020 alongside the Central Valley Proud Boys. But there are signs its efforts to provide services have worked. The group has in recent years gained favor among some in the community, as evidenced by the response to a sheriff's office Facebook post that warned residents to, quote, be aware of a local militia around the Mariposa town area. The post was soon flooded. Like, if you've ever looked at like local Facebook stuff, it is the absolute fucking worst. I can only imagine. Was soon flooded with support for the militia. Hours later, the sheriff's department caved. They issued an update softening their stance. Quote, clearing up confusion and answering the large amount of comments on this original post. The updated post reads, we are not unsupportive of community groups helping those affected by the Oak Fire. However, it is important that we inform the community of resources available to them by the incident in Mariposa County. The sheriff's office then added that it appreciated the militia's efforts. Well, we had received multiple notifications inquiring why we had activated that militia. So people were thinking it was an official response from the government. And that this post was intended to clarify that we have not activated them. They're acting on their own courteous accord. A little pat on the head. We appreciate their efforts and any of the efforts of other private groups or entities helping our community. And, you know, happen to have a right-wing extreme political agenda. That's fine, apparently. Leadership of Echo Company did not respond to an emailed request for comment. And the Mariposa County Sheriff's Office also declined to comment. Wildfires have been a particularly active time for militias. So if we want to look at how, you know, if we look at climate change, climate emergency as one of the emergencies induced by collapsing, decaying capitalism that is unable to care for its population, unable to care for its environment, it's unable to care for anything except for quarterly profits. Well, this is one of the ways that it's going to directly lead to fascism. Unless the left gets there first. I'm not seeing that currently. Again, that could be different 3, 4, 5 years from now, and I hope it is, but a lot more organizing needs to happen to out-organize these people. It's not enough to, yes, it's important for us to make ourselves known, do Antifa research and disseminate information about why these people shouldn't be followed, but until you start giving people an alternative, and I know that there are groups out there doing it, but we have to do it more. That's what needs to be promoted, and these people, no matter what information we put out, are still going to have more of an audience and sympathy than they should have. It's just a fact. Anyway, wildfires, have been a particularly active time for militias, including Echo Company, often due to misinformation that Antifa or groups of looters were coming to take advantage of their communities. In 2020, law enforcement in California and the Pacific Northwest struggled to contain false rumors that Antifa was intentionally setting wildfires so that, quote, Antifa buses. You have to be a deranged right-wing boomer to think this shit up, but they were, and people were believing it. So that Antifa buses could surge into towns and loot local businesses. Because honestly, there's nothing more that anti-fascists want than to set a fire as a decoy for some podunk town with 2,000 people in it, and barely anything of value. You're going to pull all the Main Street business owners away to like fight the fire. Meanwhile, the Antifa bus is going to loot your general store. This is what people were believing, because that's how sort of paranoid and out of touch they are. Maybe they watched that Red Dawn movie one too many times, but they were believing it. And this is the kind of shit we're up against. You know, just take note, because it's something that we have to deal with. Mickey Hernandez, a leader of the larger, I guess more mainstream, California state militia, said that Echo Company was expelled from the group for providing private security to companies, fearing the false Facebook rumors that Antifa was set to come loot stores in Atwater, California. Well, we had a falling out, so to speak. We deactivated the unit officially from us, but they continue to use our moniker, he said. And who knows? Maybe that's true. Maybe they have a secret behind the scenes agreement. We don't know. The QR code handed out to Mariposa locals Sunday directed those who scanned it to a cloned California State Militia 2nd Infantry website that is unaffiliated with Hernandez's larger group. So if there is no agreement, there definitely Echo Company is certainly that's a pretty hostile action, I would say, as far as inter-organization dynamics go. Before the group was banned from Facebook during a broader platform crackdown on militias, Echo Company posted pictures of their group in fatigues, providing security in the community, including guys standing on the roof with weapons, Hernandez said. Militias, in California especially, can't do things like that for hire with weapons, especially because of California law. It creates doubt in the public's mind about what we're trying to do. So yeah, the non-existent, magical mystery tour Antifa bus is going to come in and loot, but these guys were standing on the roof. This may just become a permanent fixture at some point, where it just becomes normal for like white supremacist dominated towns to start posting people with assault rifles on the roof. Reinforces in-group solidarity and, I mean, you look at the history of the United States, there's precedent for this kind of stuff, especially in that area, the Pacific Northwest. Look up the Northwest Territorial Imperative. This is basically the idea that white supremacists should move up to that area and like take it over. In fact, the state of Oregon originally was intended to just be like a whites-only state. They're intending to solve the slavery, non-slavery problem by just having it be white only. There you go. So there's a lot of history of that in that area. All right, anyway, before the regiment was banned from Facebook, Echo Company posted a logo of the Three Percenters, an extremist movement that advocates for a second American Civil War. Brian Ferguson, and again, when they say they want a civil war, it's because they want a more fascist government. You would not like it if you're a socialist. Brian Ferguson, a spokesperson for the California Office of Emergency Services, said there is no circumstance in which California would, quote, activate a militia. Quote, California has a National Guard. We have a military. We do not have a state militia, he said. This is something we take very seriously. This is in no way related to the state. It is not something we condone, unquote. And again, at least officially, they do not condone it. But capitalism in times of crisis, this is what they fall back on, officially or otherwise. Goldwasser said that while militias may provide assistance in the moment, there's danger in allowing them to take over for official aid organizations after emergencies. Quote, there's no easy way to regulate how militias carry out their volunteerism during or after natural disasters, she said, since they are not invited to participate and are not managed by a legitimate agency or authorized agency. They may be discriminatory in who they choose to help, or worse, discriminate against victims whose ideologies or skin colors are different from their own. On Facebook, comments continued to pour in supporting Echo Company, thanking the group for pancakes, with many insisting it was, quote, good to stop looters. Thank you for your service. The police can't be everywhere. They have few enough in our areas. Don't loot. We won't shoot. Okay. Anybody else see the problem here? A top comment reads, quoting a Facebook post from Trump from May 2020. Others responding to the sheriff's office post insisted their community didn't need the militia's help. Quote, there's a wide open park with a shade-filled pavilion, completely empty. You would figure that would be the perfect area for evacuees to eat and unwind, but no, they chose a couple parking lots in the middle of town, highly visible, so they could advertise, a commenter responded. They have no authority, they're in costume, they want attention, that is all. Well, they also want political organizing. Otherwise, they would move their charade to a place that makes. So anyway, just on that topic, I don't think that we're at the point currently where, some sort of U.S. state secession to create like a, People's Republic of California. I don't think that makes any kind of sense right now. Honestly, it's laughable. Like, who would do that? Like, what organization even has remotely that much power and influence? No one does. Like, the level of organizing, the difference between where we're at now and where we need to be is huge. If you're not already active with an organization in your community, get active now, be in regular contact with them. And if it's not an organization that regularly does things, find one that is, because we need to be out there organizing people, and the right wing currently is ahead. All right. So another comment back on COVID. My mom, who was actually a COVID denier, got really bad mental fog, and she ended up falling, hitting the back of her head, had severe blood clots, and then she lost her sense of smell, maybe permanently. Yes, I understand the loss of sense of smell lasts for a very long time. I can't say for sure, but I suspect she fell because of her mental fog. Glad she survived, but I can definitely see how COVID increases overall risk of death. Yeah, in many ways. And I don't know if she's had brain scans, but you can get a brain bleed. I actually know somebody that happened to recently. They had a fall, and then after the fall for months, they were having kind of dementia and disorientation. Turned out they had a brain bleed, needed surgery. So yeah. Our quote leaders haven't just learned nothing from the COVID pandemic. It's worse than that. They learned the wrong lesson. In their eyes, the biggest mistake was creating such public awareness of COVID. U.S. healthcare system will be weaker during the next pandemic. Well, the next pandemic's starting now. It's monkeypox. A lot of healthcare workers have quit, and a significant amount of healthcare workers died during the pandemic. You're absolutely right. And I agree with you. You think back, this is not a one-to-one, so I don't want to make it out to be a one-to-one, but think of a horrific event that involved systemic mass death. For example, concentration camps. Did the government, any government that has done concentration camps, I mean, including, they're not death camps exactly, but the migrant camps at the U.S. border, does the government know what they're doing? Yeah, they know what they're doing. People who try to do the incompetence thing, is there incompetence in the government? I mean, yeah, at some levels for sure. Are there inefficiencies? Yeah, definitely. Is the U.S. government also under very specific direction? Yeah, definitely is. And also the military. If you think that the military is merely incompetent, I have news for you. You don't keep hundreds of bases around the world and just be grossly incompetent. So yeah, I think that we're in the point now where, like I said, just simply the CDC needs to be fought, because the country is on fire with COVID right now. On the transmission map, again, it's like 95% of the country is at the highest level, and they're relaxing guidance. If that doesn't tell you that they're utterly trying to wash their hands of this whole thing, I don't know what does. So anyway, just want to make viewers here aware that the Antifafa podcast is beginning organizing a worker inquiry research program. They need programmers, researchers, and labor activists. I don't know what that is. Honestly, that looks like a typo. Can you provide better info if you want to do a PSA in the comments here? Yes, people have zero time to cook for themselves or their families, which is why restaurants can't close. Also, a lot of people don't know how to cook. I do eventually want to, I do know how to cook. I learned years ago. It's an extraordinarily valuable skill. You can save substantial amounts of food, or sorry, amounts of money by making, at least cooking twice a week. You can cut down your eating out bills substantially. Also, lessen your exposure to COVID, because there are a lot of people in food service who are now going to be going to work sick and touching your food with COVID hands. So, yeah. But it's a huge problem. Another comment, take it from me, restaurant owners are fascist, restaurant workers leftist mostly. Yeah, I've worked in restaurants before. They are some of the most unprofessional, underregulated businesses. Like, the industry as a whole is one of the most underregulated as far as like worker protections and things like that. Some of the sleaziest people you will meet outside of, more industries that are more concerned with sleaze as the product, I think you're most likely to meet some of the sleaziest people there in the restaurant business. That said, I love food. I do like eating out. I mean, like it's not like food is an unworthy product or something like that. But yeah, the way it's run is disgusting, honestly. But you know, it's an easy thing. It's not capital intensive, so people can set up a small restaurant easily, and it's a great way to like launder money and other kinds of stuff. So there's all kinds of ugly shit happening. That said, food is one of the most beautiful parts of the human experience. So it's a shame. Anyway, the whole U.S. society and government went YOLO a long time ago. Agree. Um, this is, I think, next level. I think that this is next level. Recently, Bernie Sanders was asked, how do you combat doomerism? Hey, how about don't feed your movement into the goddamn Democrats? How about that? How about that? How about you don't make a movement that desperately wants radical social change and then feed them into a party where, you're just, oh, my good friend Joe, my good friend Joe. Is he still your good friend Joe, Bernie? Because he's killing people. Like, pick a policy. We're in the dark ages again. Is he your good friend? How about, some of the most hope I saw from people was during the Bernie Sanders campaigns. It was a real ray of hope as far as, oh, you mean hundreds of thousands, even millions of people also want major reforms to the system at a minimum? That was huge because nobody was really rallying that in a mainstream kind of way where it was like, quote, average people were like, yes, I am also hugely struggling. We were having that conversation and rallying for political activity. And everywhere he went, people were, going to sold out stadiums with lines around the block. How do you combat doomerism? How about don't commit mass suicide as a political movement? That would be an idea. Asking Bernie Sanders, how do you combat doomerism? The guy, he's the one that gave you the feeling of despair in the first place by rallying all your optimism and then fucking pissing on it. That's what Bernie Sanders did. We need the Bernie Sanders moment again, but outside the Democratic Party where they can't fuck with it in the same way. They will still try to fuck with it. But if we don't get independent of the Republicans and Democrats and of course the Libertarians and the other right-wing constitution parties, if we don't get independent of the capitalist parties, there's never gonna be hope. So the comment continues: Americans have, for just reasons, given up hope. No, people are not trying. They're not trying, and I get the challenges people are up against, but also the amount of there's some legitimate fear and there's some cowardice. There is some true burnout and there is also laziness. There's just a lack of struggle in many key areas. Now I see more unions starting up, like people are doing some kinds of organizing now, finally. But I'll definitely tell you, as somebody who has been involved in various things for 20 years, I've been standing around this entire time trying to get people to join this or join that or, come to this discussion or this or that. And people just fucking won't. Okay? So at some point, people do have to take responsibility for their own action, for their own political future. And fucking, this is why I say, like, if you're not at a minimum organizing in the Green Party, if not a Marxist group, but like at a minimum the Green Party, because they don't take the corporate money. They're basically Bernie Sanders minus the Democrats and a bit better because of it. If you're not at a minimum doing that, I don't want to hear it. Join something, get involved, and build something. Form a left coalition in your city, in your state. If you are not doing that, you're part of the fucking problem at this point. And people need to take responsibility for that. I get that there are problems. I get that, there are organizations that just don't call you back when you call them up. That's okay. Then they're also to blame. But find one that does, find something you can do. If people are not at a minimum doing things like that, then they're part of the problem. When you just give up hope, what happens? Does anything change? No. So you can't do that. You just simply can't. You can't afford yourself the luxury of that kind of despair. It's a very sort of bourgeois attitude. Um, really, people have to shake this off and realize this is a fight, and if you don't fight back, you lose. That's it. And if you're okay with losing, then stop complaining. If you're not okay with losing, then go do something. Okay? So another comment. So unfortunately, my Communist Party branch may disband or at least become much less active due to student members going away to study. A little disillusioned, but will keep up the struggle. May move to a less conservative area to do it. Yeah, I mean, there are plenty of areas that are not super conducive to organizing for sure. But if we don't start finding solutions to this, and you're not going to just get them on a podcast, like you're not going to get them on a Twitch stream, people have to come up with solutions, and there are ideas going around, there are conversations you can get involved in, um, but yeah, people have to find solutions. Otherwise it's going to be more of the same, and to be honest, I think people really are just laying down and giving up, and nothing is going to get better that way. So you know if that's what people want, then that's, I mean, that's how to get it. So continuing, I've been trying for the past 3 years to get through to my high school friends who are all outspoken racists, and I made absolutely no progress. I try the street epistemology method, and they just start to heckle and ad hominem me. Yeah, well, it sounds like your friends are pieces of shit, so I guess hopefully they're not your friends for long. Yes, you cannot talk to fascists unless they want to change. There's, I think one of the things that fascism offers people in a dying country like this one is that illusion of superiority. It's like why, poor white workers will commit class suicide in order to hang on to white privilege, because for them it may be a more tangible thing than the, seemingly vague possible future promise of a class-based solidarity. So what I see in my mind when you're describing that is people like that who want this, and you see it with like people with Pepe avatars and stuff like that. It's people who are able to cash in on this, I'm on the winning team, I'll make you suffer, like kind of thing. It's obviously all illusion. They obviously don't have any real power, but it's a way for them to psychologically shield themselves from the horrors of the system without actually having, to summon up the courage to stand up to it in any real way that risks something. And it may even benefit them, sucking up to it. So you can try pointing that out to them. I don't know if they have the capacity to understand that, but you know. Another comment feels like my don't know, my ARE is going to suffer from brain drain. Oh, area is going to suffer from brain drain due to cost of living crisis and young people moving elsewhere. Well, I got to say, we were talking about this in the Wednesday stream. There's almost nowhere to go at this point. The housing crisis is spreading because of all the white collar workers who can work from home, which is like, honestly, good for them. Uh, the problem is the sticky floor jobs that, I mean, yes, you can find in any city or, many larger towns even. But the problem is it's not just them, but it's there's a housing crisis across the board. I mean, it's really being driven by things like Airbnbs and stuff like that. But it's kind of like the final nail in the coffin now is more people are able to work remotely, and they can like move, maybe they were had to be in San Francisco physically before, but now they can move 5 hours away. Well, now there's suddenly demand in the more rural areas that there wasn't like 2 years ago. So again, it's not like this is not the fundamental underlying problem, but it is kind of like the final nail in the coffin is now people are buying stuff in rural places and working from home, and it's kind of fucking, it's like I said, a final nail in the coffin of an already fucked up situation. So yeah, we have a housing crisis. I mean, that was something I think even Bernie Sanders wasn't talking about. It wasn't quite as pronounced at that time, but I mean, people even in Occupy were talking about it. That needs to be addressed now as much as any of the other major crises. So I don't know. Yes, this stream is being recorded and will be posted. Yeah, I'll probably upload it right after this. Can Trump run again? I believe so. I believe that's his stated intention, and it's probably why, you know, like Democrats never run on doing helpful things for people. They always run on, but look at how scary the Republicans are. It's like, okay, great, but at some point we need an alternative to the Republicans where things don't also get worse, but slightly more slowly. We need things to get better at some point. And this is by design because the same basic people fund both parties. And by doing that, it's a puppet show. One's on the left hand, one's on the right hand, but it's controlled by the same people. There's no actual independent interaction there. So either way, it does look like Trump. I can believe that, one of the things that they're looking for in the FBI search of Mar-a-Lago is nuclear documents. Like there's some speculation, it's still early, but there's speculation that Trump was trying to sell nuclear secrets to Saudi Arabia. I could believe that. I could believe that. Either way, though, I mean, it still feeds the Republicans are the boogeyman thing that is like the Democrats' basic sole strategy. They don't run on like helping people at all. They recently tried to do things like, oh, we're going to do $15 minimum wage. Oops, two senators opposed it. Darn, we got to throw the whole thing away, and we're not going to have any sanctions on those members of our party. Oops, oh well. Like, what a joke. People who still believe that, like who fall for that routine are kind of ridiculous. Yeah. Antifa always arrives on the Fortnite battle bus, of course. Uncritical support for PLA ground invasion of Oregon. Okay. They were monitoring the person who fell for brain bleed, but thankfully, that's good. Um, oh, Antifada. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I don't know anything about that Discord, but that's fine for now. My second chef job I was working for 900 pounds per month, doing 80-hour work weeks. The bosses pocketed the tips too. Do you have like a functioning Department of Labor? I mean, the sort of like labor overwatch agencies are largely pretty toothless, but that is one of the things that at least in the US they usually can't. Like if they can do anything, they can do that. They can like try to get your tips back or something. I would recommend looking into it at least. S4A, do you know who Andrew Tate is? The name sounds really familiar, but I'm not placing it. He's one of infinite pipelines to fascist ideology for young men. He said, quote, if you're poor, you can't justify cooking a Costco chicken that is $5. Eat that and get back to work till you're a millionaire. You're never going to be a millionaire. So it's so absurd. Why would you do civilization if like the average person can't at least afford like decent food? I mean, really, these are such that people are swallowing this like at all is crazy. But yeah, what an anti-human notion. Literally all of hunter-gatherer society built around finding and preparing food. Love my fellow food service workers. You deserve the world. Yeah, I mean, I've done other things. I've spent at least a third of my work life in food service and in various venues. And I mean, it's one of the most like reliable places. Like everybody needs to eat in every area. Once you get experience, it can tend to be, there can tend to be some momentum and inertia there. Like it's just easier to get hired into the field that you've already done stuff in. But yeah, the work can definitely suck for sure. It kind of just depends on whether the place is kind of chill or not. I've had some really party loving managers, and I've had some really anal like Gestapo managers. So it it depends. They can be pretty bad though. It's also like just in terms of prestige is not like highly regarded in society, even though it's like extremely valuable work. Like people need to eat at least two or three times a day, and everybody loves food and all this kind of stuff. Yet the people who like work with food are somehow like the most looked down upon people in society. So I assume we're talking about Bernie here. He gave you hope by there being someone there saying what needed to be said, but then immediately capitulated to the party. He doesn't even allow to have the name of next to his name. Shaking my head. Yeah, I really have a hard time seeing Bernie as anything other than a sheepdog. Would encourage people to see it the same way. Um, if Bernie was for real at all, he would have done dramatically different things. Specifically, in 2016, after we've covered this many times since the beginning of the channel, it was a good effort to use the Democratic Party for the publicity and the spotlight. And then, after they fucked over everybody who was in the Bernie wing of the primary, not everybody would have followed to the Green Party, but I'd say at least half probably would have. Plus, it would have been a big boost for people who hadn't even come out for Bernie, but were like, oh, there's a third party. Like a giant, excuse me, number of people want there to be something left of the current system. Yeah, he could have just been like, okay, well, it was a fun run, good primary. I'm still not a Democrat. We are either starting a new Labor Party now, and everybody's invited to join it who believes in these kind of principles, or we're just going to join the Green Party because the Green Party is literally doing everything that we're doing, plus another 10 or 20%. Could have just done that, didn't. And they didn't have to run in 2016. You could have said, okay, we're going to sit this one out. If people want to hold their nose and vote for Hillary, fine. But we're going to be back in the 2018 midterms. And we've got 2 years to build up our party to run candidates at every level of state and local government. And you better believe we're going to be back in 2020 for federal. That would have been the obvious move. And he didn't do it. And he didn't do it in 2020 either. So fuck Bernie. Like we need to do that again where people are filling stadiums, etc. For actual like left-wing policies. Like, yes, it could have gone further, but that was a significant amount of people rallied there. Also, a lot of the early people who came to this channel, I know, came out of that. So it definitely did draw people to the left and embolden people to look into like, what is socialism actually? One of the like reasons for doing this channel, to be honest. And it's growing rapidly. Like there's a lot of people interested in that. We need to do it again, but outside the Democratic Party and obviously without Bernie, obviously. Workers' inquiries are not something I know about, but there are lots of people contributing to the research part as well. Oh, you're talking about the Antifada. We're building a web scraper and a common API to pull data from Fred and BLS. There is a larger goal to the project as a centralized repository for information helpful across industry actions. Yeah, please get out of here with the degrowth shit. Just please. All right. If you give up hope, things do change. They get worse. I mean, there's something to be said for giving up hope on things that don't work, for sure. Like there's giving up false hope. But if you just give up the fight and let people walk all over you, you're gonna wind up with footprints on your face. That's really, you know, that's pretty simple. All right, somebody is posting in Russian. In case you haven't noticed, this is not especially a Russian language chat, so I'm not sure how many people are going to be able to read that. What's being posted? The White Army, the Black Baron again preparing us the royal throne, but from the Taiga to the British seas, the Red Army is stronger. Didn't know that one. Can you get my thoughts on this article? Critique on the Green Party. You know, like I said, the Green Party is the bare minimum people can be doing. If you're not at least doing that, you're doing nothing. So, also that they are okay with corporate money. Why don't they take corporate money? So I don't know. There's a lot of bad faith stuff said about the Green Party as well. So, keep that in mind. Like, I've posted even vague support for the Green Party, been attacked for it. When you dig into it, a lot of it is coming from Democrats. This says a socialist case against Howie Hawkins and the Green Party. This is who even is this writing? I don't know this author. So it's somebody promoting, quote, true socialism over the Green Party. I don't think we're going to get very far as a left in the United States without a coalition. And if you think the Green Party isn't going to be part of that coalition, I think you're wrong. So I've said before, I think Occupy was the first major national step for the U.S. left in this post-2008 era. And to be honest, before that, what was there? The anti-war movement. It was vague. It was diffuse. There's the anti-Bush movement. There wasn't much there. In the current sort of post-2000 era, you had Occupy Wall Street, you had Bernie 1 and 2. I think we need it again, but outside the Democratic Party. My idea would be left coalition. At the national level, left coalition USA. At the local level, left coalition Denver, left coalition Detroit, left coalition Sacramento, left coalition Baltimore, et cetera, et cetera. You get all your local left parties together. They remain independent entities with their own internal governance structure, but you set up some coalition rules and you start working together. And the Green Party is an obvious choice for that. I don't have time to go through this article right now. But from everything I've seen with the Green Party, no, it's qualifies as a start point for the left. The Central Committee of my Communist Party got criticism from this year's strategy document because it was too, quote, vague. It's like comrades want people to write out a step-by-step guide to doing revolution. This is why we study dialectical materialism and combine that with experience in our communities. Yeah, so you can't just skip steps. You got to work. It's like people want to just invent this new left out of whole cloth. You have to work with the left you have currently. And okay, I get it. You're going to struggle with that left ideologically and in various actions. And some people aren't going to make the cut. Some people are going to be unwilling to move their position when their position isn't working. That's going to happen. But many will. And, this is like, we see it even on like in the tiny little petri dish of social media. There was the land back question. Some people made the cut on that. Some people became Pat socks. And on with other questions. Even something like force the vote, which I think made sense. That was the last time I agreed with Jimmy Dore. It was a year and a half ago. That made sense. You've elected the squad. They said that they were going to bring the ruckus, and they're doing zero agitation for the things that they said they would do. Instead, they got in and they started just playing nice with the rest of the Democrats by and large. We didn't hear a lot else about that. AOC even dropped most of the Medicare for All like merchandise off of her website. Like it was scrubbed almost. So put some pressure on those people to be like, hey, you said you're going to bring the ruckus, get in there. That makes sense. Honestly, it does. And some people didn't make that cut. Some people are like, no, we can't rock the boat. Okay, great. You're a garden variety Democrat if you don't even want to rock the boat on that. That was absurd. But, then a lot of the people who even did agree with that sort of failed other questions. So the movement moves along in a way that is actually going to be helpful to large amounts of people, not just in words, but also in actions. But yeah, you got to work with the left that you have. And if you can't work with the left that you have, then you've retreated into the realm of imagination. So yeah, this is why we study dialectical materialism and combine that with experience in our communities. You have to actually go by what the situation is. You can understand how other historical situations have played out in the past and use that as sort of reference, or if you're trying to avoid certain things, you can understand what dynamics led to bad outcomes in the past and try to avoid that. But yeah, you got to work with the reality that's in front of you. And there are times where it's intractable, it's very stubborn and it won't budge. But the bottom line is this is the reality that we're dealing with, and we've got to apply the methods that we know to get it to do the things that are going to be helpful as far as liberation. You know, the public, and this has been true throughout every stage of class society, feudalism, slave society, etc. There are always revolts against the powerful because people don't like being oppressed and exploited. But that doesn't mean that they're necessarily successful. Part of the point of scientific socialism or Marxism is we look through all that. We study the uprisings and the outcomes. We look at the material causes. We look at the class interests underpinning different actions. And we're able to study and come up with what is actually going to work. And unfortunately, a lot of this has just been abandoned and people are going back to just winging it. And that sort of spontaneity worship isn't really great. But, how do we get people back onto the track of scientific socialism? Well, I think that a lot of base level education needs to happen. That's one of the things I believe in. And that's reflected in my efforts here at Socialism for All. I think that we need a lot of base level education. But that said, parties should be doing it. I think in much bigger ways than the Communist Party of the United States should be not be outpaced by a rando who set up a channel 2.5 years ago. That would be me. Okay. I shouldn't be outpacing, quote, the Communist Party of the United States in terms of an online presence doing, base level socialist education. Now, there's other people who claim to be socialist and are outpacing S4A as well. For example, Infracell. But what he's doing is not education. It's just like buffoonery, and most people just watch to like laugh. So, but as far as within the actually Marxist world doing education, we wouldn't have an Infracell if the parties were already out there with 100,000 subs doing regular useful education. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's no excuse for this at all. So I get that there's not a step-by-step guide, but coming back around is, the strategy documents. I can see it in CPUSA. I was just watching one of their live streams. I watched 8 minutes of it, like last week, and my God, it's still indistinguishable from a Democratic Party live stream. They're talking about Merrick Garland, and it's like, what fucking planet are you on? You think this is like revolutionary? It was craziness. It looked like just a low budget Democratic Party stream. And yeah, they'll say things like, oh, like, well, we're not for left adventurism. Yeah, I think you're overcorrecting, like, to say the least. Like, is the big problem right now left adventurism or is it right opportunism? Like, overwhelmingly, it's skewed towards right opportunism. Overwhelmingly, it's not even close. You could come so far back to the center and still be right of center on the communist spectrum, and still not be anywhere near left adventurism, and it would still be a significant leftward shift. So yes and no. Step by step, maybe not, but could they be doing a lot more education? Absolutely. I can't believe it took a pandemic for people to be allowed to work at home. It's an interesting point. But this is, you see, in 2020, I think this is really what they're trying to avoid. I haven't really come back around to this for a while, but I think what they're really trying to avoid is another like George Floyd protests, BLM protests moment. When they paid people to stay home, within like a couple of weeks, people are out in the streets by the millions. I think that's really what they're trying to avoid, and why they're downplaying COVID so much. That said, though, I mean, they're not even doing a fucking mask mandate. So it goes beyond that as well, but I think that was Pull the trigger on cooking with S4A. I have some other things I'm trying to get to first, but I have already started making notes for it. So, yeah, Joe is a good friend of mine. I know what you call an enemy of my enemy. What do you call a friend of my enemy? Excellent point. Is there any value in registering as a Dem to participate in their primary? Um, so I no, I believe that it is the fundamental task of the U.S. left to break completely from the Democratic Party and all capitalist parties. No, the Democratic Party, even when you win as a Dem, you lose as a worker. The party just does not get you anywhere. Now, if you're talking about it in terms of like keeping Republicans out, if that's a decision you want to make locally, um, obviously, like you're going to do what you're going to do. The point here is if we don't start organizing something better than the Democrats, things are going to keep getting worse because no matter how many Democrats get elected, things keep getting worse. I don't think it should take me saying that. No matter how many Democrats get elected, things get worse. Now, if you feel like in your area things would be like catastrophic overnight with Republicans, I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong. And what I am going to say, though, is if we don't organize something better than the Democrats for struggle, not just in the electoral system, which is completely fucked up and controlled, but organizing a left coalition, various workers' parties and left parties for general activism and organizing, because it's not just electoral things. It can also be community calls for just pressure groups, like a minimum wage increase or whatever. Various reforms under capitalism as we build the support for revolution, which both takes the reforms further and makes them permanent. But in the short term, you fight for every reform that you can, but you keep pushing the whole time. So is there any value in registering as a Dem? I mean, no, I think that it's personally time to completely break with the Democratic Party. It's like the fundamental thing the left needs to do. We don't organize something better than the Democrats, things will keep getting worse. Even the best Democrat things still get worse. So as far as how did the Greens win when first past the post is what it is, is your mind this fucking small? I'm so tired of hearing this. We're in the same position we have been in for the last 20 years. For as long as I have been watching politics at all, things are exactly the fucking same. In terms of things getting better, they're actually much worse. But like the low level of organization is roughly what it was 20 years ago. That's unacceptable because everything is falling apart. Living standards getting dramatically worse. Homeless crisis getting dramatically worse. Even people who aren't flat out homeless are at much more risk for it than ever before. Food prices going up. And people are still like on this altar of, but what can I do? The elections. Oh my fucking God. If you're this helpless, don't ever expect to win. Don't ever expect to win. Keep doing things that don't work. Tell me how that goes. Actually, don't. I can tell you how it goes because I've been watching it for 20 fucking years. It gets you nowhere. It gets you where we are now. Is this good? Well, if you want more of it, keep doing what's been done. I don't think that this is good. I think that the left needs to radically break with what's been done. My God, Marx and Engels in 1850 said flat out, this is the pinned video for returning subscribers on the channel. Whatever gains the reactionaries may make, it will be worth it for the workers to organize something that is independent of bourgeois influence. If you don't organize hubs of class struggle, activism, and consciousness spreading, which can be active not just in the electoral system, but in many other ways, then you're never going to have anything. If you don't organize these bastions of proletarian consciousness, places where workers can come together free of bourgeois influence, which is what the Democratic Party's middle name is at every level of that party, full of bourgeois ideas. It's completely locked down from top to bottom. If you don't break away from that and start organizing something free of that ideology, you're never going to get anywhere. It's what I've been watching for the last 20 years in this country. And yes, there's always left fringe groups, but it has to go mainstream at some point or nothing will change. Somebody says main criticism of the Green Party seems to be them concentrating on national elections instead of organizing around local races. And before mindlessly repeating that, is that accurate? Every place I have lived, Green Party runs people in local and state elections. So is this accurate? Can we just stop repeating Democratic Party talking points? If you can't even get a Green Party off the ground, do you think you're getting a revolutionary Communist Party off the ground? Where do you think the support is going to come from? My God. We got somebody else in here. You're a force the voter. If you guys know what's good for you, avoid Jimmy Dore later. Okay, well, thank you for announcing your departure. Let me help you with that. If you were listening, that was the last thing that I agreed with Jimmy Dore on. Literally like a week later, he had that Boogaloo Boy on for like an infomercial, and I did a 2-hour video about that, as well as several follow-up videos. So no, this is not a Jimmy Dore channel. Thank you for not listening, I guess. If I sound pissed off today, this is how I am every day. This is, in part because of the CDC's new guidance. I have been in a pretty bad mood, like shocked and stunned, since the CDC announced like 2 days ago that they're completely abandoning any COVID control efforts, more or less. I've been in shock since that. But I swear to God, I assume people showing up here think to some extent you're in some kind of a vanguard of class consciousness. Do better. Do better. Seriously. It's kind of sad. And I think we just need to be real about this once in a while, you know? All right. Before we wrap up, I had a couple other articles, so let me pull from that, and then we'll have a little discussion, and then we will close out. So actually, the last article that I had, actually here, let's have a little fun. There was an insane comment that I had. Somebody with a Ted Kaczynski avatar. They were looking at one of the Lenin videos on nationalism, and they commented this. Well, that is why this is a Lenin quote, that is why internationalism on the part of oppressors or great nations must consist not only in the observance of the formal equality of nations, but even in an inequality of the oppressor nation, the great nation that must make up for the inequality which obtains in actual practice, unquote. So the famous not a cuckold Lenin. Are you still using the word cuck? I swear to God. I swear to God. Just the lack of originality. If you belong to an ethnic majority and support communism, you're a cuckold, because communism is a tool of ethnic minorities for taking power and wealth from the ethnic majority. It's literally what happened to Russia after 1917. Well, this is wrong. Communism is not primarily about ethnicity, although to the extent that empires do oppress and exploit certain ethnicities, and imperialism is a thing, exporting capital into purposely underdeveloped countries in order to exploit them as an entire country, in addition to exploiting your domestic proletariat once capitalism is completely built at a high level within your country. Anyway, but this is your average sort of right-wing, I guess, understanding of it. A tool of ethnic minorities. So what's completely omitted from the understanding here is that the ethnic minorities are in fact oppressed. Like there's no recognition of that at all. The idea here is, I guess, don't be communist if you're in an imperialist country, because it means that your country's ruling class, not the average person, but the ruling class, is going to be giving up power to the people that they're currently oppressing. So basically, just get on board with the oppression that your country's ruling class is committing against other nations, even though you don't really benefit from that. To the extent you benefit from it at all, it's a tiny, tiny fraction um, of what the ruling class does. But really, you want somebody oppressing people on your behalf? Is that what you're telling me? That's the way you want to live your life? Is you want to be a parasite off of other people, and not even a real parasite. You don't even have what it takes to be in the ruling class. You want to like bottom feed to the next level. You just want to imitate the parasites that are ruling you and also exploiting you. That's just, and you're calling Lenin a cuck. Please. Anyway, so just out of curiosity, I went to their page, and of course they're subscribed to Destiny. All right. Anyway, our final thing here. So this is on an environmental note. Everybody wants to apparently talk about the Green Party. It's from Euronews.green, or I think it also goes by Euronews.com. This is a story widely reported this past week. Rainwater everywhere on Earth is now unsafe to drink due to forever chemicals. Study finds by Rosie Frost, August 8, 2022. So the chemicals they're talking about, we're going to read the article, it's short, are PFAS. So I forget off the top of my head, it's per and polyfluoroalkyls substances, I think, what PFAS stands for. But they're basically, industrial chemicals now used in various consumer products that don't really break down, and they are now found in rainwater everywhere on Earth. I believe no amount of this is safe, and some amount is found in rainwater. Let's see. Rainwater almost everywhere on Earth has unsafe levels of forever chemicals, according to new research. Per and polyfluoroalkyl, substances, PFAS, are a large family of human-made chemicals that don't occur in nature. They're known as forever chemicals because they don't break down in the environment. So why don't they break down in the environment? Well, if they're human-made, don't occur in nature at all, then there may not be organisms that have, enzymes and other metabolic processes that are capable of sort of recognizing and dealing with these. A lot of times there will be at least some sort of chemical analog, something that's similar to an artificial chemical that biological systems will be able to handle and dismantle in some way. But these really don't break down in the environment. Anyway, they have non-stick or stain repellent properties, so they can be found in household items like food packaging, electronics, cosmetics, and cookware. But now researchers at the University of Stockholm have found them in rainwater in most locations on the planet, including Antarctica. There is no safe space to escape them. Safe guideline levels for some of these forever chemicals have dropped dramatically over the last 2 decades due to new insights into their high toxicity. Quote, there's been an astounding decline in guidance values for PFAS in drinking water in the last 20 years, says Ian Cousins, lead author of the study and professor at the Department of Environmental Science, Stockholm University. For one well-known substance, the, quote, cancer-causing perfluorooctanoic acid, PFOA, water guidance guideline values have declined by 37.5 million times in the United States. Based on the latest U.S. guidelines for PFOA in drinking water, rainwater everywhere would be judged unsafe to drink because even a tiny amount is unsafe, and it's found in at least that amount everywhere. Although in the industrial world we don't often drink rainwater, many people around the world expect it to be safe to drink, and it supplies many of our drinking water sources. What risks do they pose? The health risks of being exposed to these substances have been researched widely. Scientists say that they could be linked to fertility problems, increased risk of cancer, and developmental delays in children. But others say that no cause and effect can be proven between these chemicals and poor health. Despite this, and as a result of this new research, some are calling for tighter restrictions on PFAS. Quote, it cannot be that some few benefit economically while polluting the drinking water for millions of others and causing serious health problems, says Dr. Jane Monk, managing director of the Food Packaging Foundation in Zurich, who wasn't involved in the study. Well, the vast amounts that it will cost to reduce PFAS in drinking water to levels that are safe, based on current scientific understanding, need to be paid by the industry producing and using these toxic chemicals. Time to act, she says, is now. So when we come back to this, concept of like, oh, the ethnic minorities are trying to steal the hard-won booty that their oppressors, took for them. It's, if you're even slightly interested in not just having a habitable planet, um, but even living with some semblance of a fair society, we can't be basing societies off of systematic exploitation of billions of people, and where people in the rich oppressor countries are systematically polluting the rest of the planet, and then the people in the underdeveloped, purposely underdeveloped countries, um, are inequipped to deal with that in any way, whether it's climate change, whether it's this sort of pollution. The people in the richer companies will have more technology and more ways to sort of dodge some of those effects. But it's a slow motion genocide for the rest of the world. Anyway, few more closing comments here before we sign off. I can deal with the horror in the world, but can't handle comrades' lethargy. Yeah. And so that commenter is literally coming out as a fascist, huh? Yes, clearly. And I think, you will see more and more of this as the situation gets worse, and people who have not had any previous conditioning to cooperation, social justice, whatever it is, as they get faced with more and more difficult social problems, which are going to keep arising, they're going to keep going towards these easy violence-based solutions. That's what's going to happen. The USSR had over 190 different ethnicities, the most diverse nation in contemporary history. But you see, according to this commenter, that was the problem, because they had equal status, unlike just the promise of equal status that bourgeois society offers. They say everybody's equal before the law, but that's not really the case in many different ways. But that's the problem, because the quote great Russians, or the Russians proper, didn't hold on to their Russian privilege. They gave it up and distributed it. That was, that cuck Lenin caving to the people. He was supposed to be oppressing those people. Don't you get it? According to this commenter. So yeah, they oppose us communists because we want a fair world. What pathetic level of Stockholm syndrome psychology capture is that? Deadly rainwater. What stage of capitalism is this? I mean, we had the talk of acid rain for a while, and now we've got these toxic chemicals in it as well. Yeah. Long chain carbon started with tank paint coating exported to human kitchens on your Teflon cookware. Yeah, Teflon, that there's a lot of problems there, especially if you burn a pan, throw it away. Obviously wait till it cools down and you can set your trash on fire. But yeah, once that stuff starts peeling, highly toxic. You don't want it anywhere near you. Chemical company DuPont, or they've never done anything wrong, right? Dumped toxic byproduct in Kentucky in a small town, ruined their health, everyone's gums and teeth turned black. This was the subject of Dark Waters, movie with Mark Ruffalo. Actually, somehow missed that movie entirely. That sounds interesting. Yeah, so this is especially when this is combined with dumping in poor communities, it is known as environmental racism. Because yeah, why is in the United States, the black or the Mexican American like side of town, or just whatever, like not the like dominant white culture side of town, why is it cheaper? Sometimes that's where the toxic waste dump was, and nobody in the privileged population wants to live there. And yes, this is often done knowingly. No lives matter when it comes to corporate profits. A company knew since the 1960s that it was poisonous after testing on workers by lacing cigarettes with it and giving them to factory workers. How I missed this movie, although maybe this is how. Maybe this is how. Sounds pretty damning. Um, and it's like how many thousands of stories, like this is one that happened to get turned into a movie. How many, thousands, tens of thousands of stories in the environmental health world are there? All right. So yeah, big issue in Chicago, industrial dumping grounds are in the southeast side, brown and black neighborhoods. And yeah, it's not always environmental racism, but though that is also a thing to keep in mind. Another interesting thing you can look at, there's so many tools online now. If you look at maps of cancer clusters and the overlap with who lives in those cancer clusters, that can be really interesting. All right, I'm gonna head out. This has been hopefully, like I said, consolation prize for not getting those audio books up. There will be non-streaming content up again next week. Like I said, I got a combination of us a little bit burned out after doing that like massive slate of audiobooks last weekend. If you still haven't checked them out, there's a bunch of shorter Lenin texts on war and nationalism. Do check them out. They're worth it. And otherwise, yeah, more audiobooks soon, and also more COVID update in terms of reading the articles, looking at some of the specifics, long COVID, etc. Arm yourselves with this knowledge, because I think as we head into this fall and winter, again, at least as of right now, there's no reason to think that it's not going to be a gigantic, disgusting disaster. So. All right, thanks everybody for showing up in the chat, and everybody who is listening to this on YouTube afterward. Again, streams are normally done Wednesdays, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, for about 2 hours. Sometimes we skip one, sometimes we do an extra one. This week we did an extra one. But I appreciate you all, especially all the new people who I haven't gotten a chance to talk with yet. I look forward to that, and as well as the regulars, people who have been coming around for 2 years or more in some cases. Appreciate you all and all your contributions. Now that the channel is getting bigger, about 9,400 subscribers, there's a lot of people I'm in contact with regularly. I appreciate your contributions and ideas, and this really is becoming kind of a network. That's really good, and I appreciate everybody who is taking the time to get involved. So we do, I was getting pissed before, because yeah, there's a lot of people sitting on their hands, and we just don't have time to do that. That said, there's a lot of people who aren't, and it's really great to see people who are rolling up the sleeves and getting into it. All right, thanks again, and we will catch you in the next video.